The Two Types of Meditation by Venerable Rung Ruang Papas Saro, Dr. Rung Ruang Lim Chupatipa. In an ancient time, most religions were based on belief in gods, and the focus of the practice aims to have conferences with gods, so that the gods will bless them prosperity and well-being. All of these religions shared common practices such as performing the traditional meditation by praising the god with repeated short sacred word to keep the mind focusing on the word by force, so-called mantra meditation. And typically these kinds of practices are fundamentally expected to get a kind of supernatural powers, and to be able to communicate with spirits and gods. This meditation technique is very popular to all religions, but having different sacred word. However, the Buddha criticized that the mantra meditation could calm the mind only, but it could not abandon any kinds of the unwholesome happening inside the mind, and definitely it was not the path and way to enlightenment for wisdom development as follows. The Buddha questioned the Brahmin students that if there is anyone who see the Dharma of the mantra of Brahma as claimed before, and no one can answer. And then the Buddha asked further if counting up to 7 generations backward, then if there was anyone ever saw the Dharma of the mantra of Brahma as well. And the answer is no. Therefore, the Buddha concluded that
this kind of belief that are passed from ancient of the mantra of Brahma can be compared like several blind people queuing up in a line. The first person does not see anything, but telling the story to the next one. Along the path of this telling story from the first one to the last one in the line, no one has ever seen the truths of nature, then how they can explain what is right or wrong, saying my teachings are correct and the others are not correct.
The Brahmin student Subba asks the Buddha,
Master Gautama, I have heard that the ascetic Gautama knows the path to the company of Brahma.
What do you think, student? Is the village of Nakara near here, not far from here?
Yes, sir. The village of Nakara is near here, not far from here.
What do you think, student? Suppose there was a man born and raised in the village of Nakara, and as soon as he had left Nakara, they asked him about the path to the village. Would that man be slow or hesitant in answering?
No, Master Gautama.
Why is that?
Because that man has been born and raised in Nakara, and is well acquainted with all the paths to the village.
Still, a man born and raised in the village of Nakara might be slow or hesitant in answering when asked about the path to the village, but a Tathagata, when asked about the Brahman's world or the way leading to the Brahman's world, would never be slow or hesitant in answering. I understand Brahma, and I understand the Brahman's world, and I understand the way leading to the Brahman's world, and I understand how one should practice to be reborn in the Brahman's world.
Master Gautama, I have heard that the ascetic Gautama teaches the path to the company of Brahma. It would be good if Master Gautama would teach me the path to the company of Brahma.
Then, student, listen and attend closely to what I shall say.
Yes, sir.
The Blessed One said this.
What, student, is the path to the company of Brahma? Here a monk dwells pervading one quarter with a mind imbued with loving kindness, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above, below, around, and everywhere, and to all as to himself. He dwells pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility, and without ill will. When the liberation of mind by loving kindness is developed in this way, no limiting action remains there, none persists there. Just as a vigorous trumpeter could make himself heard without difficulty in the 4 quarters, so too, when the liberation of mind by loving kindness is developed in this way, no limiting action remains there, none persists there. This is the path to the company of Brahma. Again, a monk dwells pervading one quarter with a mind imbued with compassion, with a mind imbued with altruistic joy, with a mind imbued with equanimity, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above, below, around, and everywhere, and to all as to himself, he dwells pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility, and without ill will. When the liberation of mind by equanimity is developed in this way, no limiting action remains there, none persists there. Just as a vigorous trumpeter could make himself heard without difficulty in the 4 quarters, So too, when the liberation of mind by equanimity is developed in this way, no limiting action remains there, none persists there. This too is the path to the company of Brahma. The company of Brahma is based on beliefs that passed from people in the past, such as performing mantra meditation, keeping celibacy, giving away to others, learning the mantra. Some of these teachings are good things at the level of morality, but still, it is not fully complete. In comparison, the Buddha's teachings are based on the truths of life within nature. Whatsoever I tell you, you can investigate and verify if it is true or not just believing. They are well explained by experiencing nature as it really is. For example, when I explain to you that an unwholesome mind is essentially like a fire, it is really as it is. Then I explain to you about the cause of the light is due to the burning of dry wood. Then I teach you on how to extinguish the fire so that the mind can be calm and peace. So, I explain to you in a full systematic way for the cessation of all suffering in life. In my teachings, I also accompany you with how to perform a Buddhist practice. The purpose of the practice is to teach you how to abandon the arising unwholesome mind, starting with abandoning the 5 hindrances by establishing mindfulness with attention on wholesome. And then, after being able to abandon the 5 lower fetters, the mind will enter upon and dwell in the first jhana. By this time, the mindfulness is developed to be purified mindfulness, and you can apply the purified mindfulness for insight observation to gain wisdom. And by using this knowledge for the cessations of all defilements within the mind, and then finally making use of this wisdom to purify the mind, and the mind will be liberated. These are the courses of the Buddhist practice. The Buddha's teachings are well explained, and since you have mindfulness throughout the practice, then you can realize of what is happening inside the mind, and by following in accord with the Buddha's teachings correctly, then the mind will be developed step by step till the mind is purified and liberated. The success in Buddhist practice of mindfulness meditation is well verified by the Dharma by seeing of what really the mind is in terms of the processes and its associated states of mind. This is the true knowledge that we can make use of it to abandon any arising unwholesome mind and cleanse all the unwholesome thought of the 5 lower fetters along the courses of thought. While the Brahmin practice of mantra meditation can only temporarily calm the mind for a while, and the mantra is sort of forcing the mind to be in a certain basis, such as the base of the infinity of space, the base of emptiness, etc., which is considered as kinds of supernatural powers. Clearly, the mantra meditation cannot abandon any kind of the unwholesome thought of the 5 lower fetters, and definitely it is not the way to enlightenment to see the insight for wisdom development.
The Buddha introduced a new kind of meditation by incorporating mindfulness into the meditation, so-called mindfulness meditation or Buddhist meditation, as follows.
In Buddhism, the Buddhist practice is defined as follows: to be pleased with hearing the true Dharma, the truths of nature. Study on the Buddha's teachings with careful attention to understand in the true Dharma. Establishing mindfulness with careful attention, Yoniso Manasikara, to perform the Buddhist practice in accordance with the Buddha's teachings to contemplate on the Dharma. Investigation on the true Dharma. Establishing mindfulness in accompanied with Dharma for the destructions of all kinds of defilements. By performing the Buddhist practice, such as the mindfulness meditation, with effort, so that the mindfulness becomes purified with no bias to any arising mental phenomenon, then performing insight observation on Dharma, and then seeing the truths of life within nature as what nature really is. When establishing mindfulness with careful attention, Yoniso Manasikara, and the mind will become gladness, raptured, relaxed, and concentrated, then applying purified mindfulness in insight observation to see the Dharma, and then attaining wisdom for the destructions of all the taints. As a result, the mind will become purified for a long time, and then the mind becomes disenchanted and dispassionate to the world, and consequently the mind is liberated from all suffering in life. This is the way to gain wisdom of knowing what is right and what is wrong, what we should do, or what we should not do clearly. This is called Buddhist study and practice.
Before the Enlightenment, the Buddha performed a mindfulness meditation and the jhana, mindfulness absorption, in most of the early day, especially when encountering with the initial thoughts in the first stage of absorption, and he advised on how to handle an arising initial unwholesome thought with a proper liberated thinking.
I, the Buddha, experience various kinds of initial thoughts. So I analyze these initial thoughts into two types, the unwholesome one and the wholesome one. The unwholesome ones are such as those of the 5 lower fetters, and the initial thoughts of desire for sensual pleasure, and those initial thoughts of ill will, and those initial thoughts of taking advantage of others in the first jhana. The wholesome ones are such as those initial thoughts of being free from desire for sensual pleasure, with resistance to pleasure response, and those initial thoughts of being free from ill will with forgiveness, and those initial thoughts of not taking advantage of others with kindness. The unwholesome will lead to unbeneficial, and it is harmful. It does not belong to the fundamentals of the spiritual life, while wholesome will lead to beneficial. It belongs to the fundamentals of the spiritual life. And by establishing mindfulness to abandon the arising unwholesome initial thought, then realizing that if letting the unwholesome initial thought continue, it will develop to be a harmful and unbeneficial thought to life. Then it is necessity to have mindfulness to bring in with a proper wholesome initial thought, dharma, as a liberated thinking to suppress the arising unwholesome initial thought, so that the mind will become wholesome. The Buddha spends a whole day and night to cleanse all the initial thoughts, and by then the mind is completely free from any disturbing thoughts, and the mind will proceed to the next step of the jhana.
Due to the fact that there are approaches of meditation, the mantra meditation and mindfulness meditation. In Buddhist meditation, on the day of Buddha enlightenment, the Buddha made a breakthrough discovery of the way to make use of mindfulness to abandon arising unwholesome thoughts, and then cleansed all the 5 lower fetters before dwell to the first jhana of the right concentration, which will lead to the path and way to enlightenment. The mind will become in seclusion, which is the state of being peaceful from any disturbing hindrances, and then the mind will dwell into the inner mind for performing insight observation to study the mind and its functions by exploring to see the dharma of the process of dependent origination. Both mindfulness and concentration are needed to work closely together in order to function a high-quality consciousness. However, mindfulness and concentration are different in terms of its application and its effects to the mind. The mindfulness will make the mind to be aware of what is happening in the world through acknowledging incoming stimuli from the world, while the concentration will try to hold a particular object of consciousness as long as possible. And in case if it already fades away, a new similar object of consciousness will be regenerated as the continuation of such object of consciousness. For examples, when driving a car in a street, if the mind is concentrated on a specific object of consciousness such as thinking of an image of someone, without being aware of what's happening in the street, clearly an accident is unavoidable. Definitely, when driving a car, we need to have mindfulness in the present moment at all times to be aware of what is happening in the street, so that we can drive the car safely in the street. Definitely, we should not perform a mantra meditation in a critical environment such as working with dangerous machine in factory. What the mind needs to be concentrated is only a short moment to have a clear understanding of the object of consciousness. In this analogy, living in a world with tremendous changing environments, live is in danger and easily to become unwholesome. Therefore, by having only concentration meditation like mantra meditation is not sufficient to maneuver the mind into the right pathway of mind processing. In fact, what we need is the continuity of mindfulness to cope with any danger from the world that may contaminate the mind to become unwholesome. In addition, if there is any unwholesome occurs during mind processing, then instantly establishes mindfulness to bring in a proper dharma to abandon that unwholesome along the courses of thought. In Buddhism, because of the drawback of focusing only on the concentration in mantra meditation, the Buddha had to develop a new kind of meditation by incorporating mindfulness into the early stage of meditation, then makes use of mindfulness to abandon any arising unwholesome to make the mind to be internally steadied, composed, united, and concentrated, so that the mind will proceed to the right concentration. The concept of enhancing the continuity of mindfulness applications, turning the mindfulness to be with concentration, is the foundation of the Buddhist practice in the mindfulness or Buddhist meditation, which sets apart the Buddhist meditation to be different from the traditional mantra meditation before the Buddha time.